Good morning, everybody. I see some of you have already been posting in chat, which is really nice to see, and people from everywhere in the world, it seems, joining this morning. So, welcome to everyone. My name's Andrew, and I'll be your tutor for the next 15 minutes or so, and then we'll have time after that to answer some questions. So, just to introduce myself a bit more, my name's Andrew Kirk, and I work for a team called the Digital Skills and Training Team in the university. We're part of Information Services. I'm one of the 4 or 5 training officers we've got, and it is quite a small team. And we would, under normal circumstances, be running classroom sessions on campus. Most of the stuff we're doing at the moment, though, is online webinars, but that will probably change in the future, hopefully, and not too distant future. Um, so this is all about digital skills. Now, you might be asking, well, what are digital skills? The phrase digital skills has been around for quite a few years now. When I first heard it, people did use different ways. And if you asked someone what digital skills were, and you still sometimes get these answers, you get the answer something like it's just, well, digital skills is anything to do with computers, or maybe more specifically, it's more to do with social media or different variations around that. But we have quite a precise definition in the university, and certainly within my team, is that there's skills that enable you to use technology confidently and efficiently to study, work, and live in an increasingly digital world. Okay? So I said that's quite precise, but it is also quite all-encompassing, it seems, as well. So what does that mean exactly? To study, work, and live in an increasingly digital world. So things like, for example, and this is a kind of classic, and you've probably heard the term digital native. Okay, so that phrase has been bandied around for quite a few years now. And people who were brought up with technology, people who just have always known about smartphones, laptops like that, okay? And now that is really falling out of favour, that phrase in education, because it's one thing to be able to use a smartphone or an iPad, but it's a different thing to be confident with digital skills. So while using a smartphone is a digital skill, of course, it's only one small part of it. So it can also mean things like using university systems efficiently. The university has been moving to online services over the last few years as part of its digital transformation program. So things like your student record, human resource records, university website, accessing the library catalogue, all of those university systems are online, and you need to be able to use them confidently. But then it can also be how to evaluate the information that you do find online. So most of us, of course, the first thing we do when we need to find out about a topic is Google it, don't we? Um, but Googling it is going to give you just random web pages that you then have to filter through. So a digital would include having to, or having the confidence and knowing how to find academic resources. Now, I think most of you that are joining this morning are postgraduates, and one of the big recommendations I would give you is to use the university's databases. So when you're looking for research papers, for example, university spends a lot of money on online databases of peer-reviewed journal articles. Okay, so finding out how to access those is also a really important digital skill. But it can also be creating digital content, so creating images or documents, videos, web pages, and using them to enhance your learning. So you may be asked to do a project, you may be asked to do group work and produce something at the end of it. So being able to sort of, on a very simple level, for example, if you're doing a thesis, being able to import images, but also being able to caption those images so that you can get a nice table of images in your, or table of figures in your thesis, for example. And we do classes in my team that help you construct a thesis, for example. So that would be another important digital skill. Some of you, for example, may, rather than using Word to produce papers, maybe using LaTeX, and that would be another digital skill. And then it's also a digital skill being able to know the difference. When do you need to move maybe from your Excel skills and move it up a level to use something like R programming or SPSS when you're dealing with data? It can also be, however, staying safe online. That's still a digital skill. Using antivirus, understanding strong passwords, but also protecting your own identity when you are online and how to communicate safely. Communicating and collaborating is also a digital skill. So that could be in the university, we use several different platforms. So we use things like Collaborate, which is what this session's been delivered through this morning. And it's what a lot of teaching is delivered through Collaborate via Learn, which is your virtual learning environment. And you may not have used any of those platforms before. We also use things like Microsoft Teams for meetings, for messaging each other. We use Zoom for certain meetings. So lots of different platforms in the university that you're maybe going to have to get to grips with. And then the last thing I would say is just looking at your own digital identity. So everybody's got a digital footprint, okay? So you're just starting university or maybe moving from an undergraduate course to a postgraduate course, you will necessarily, everybody does have some kind of digital footprint. But just thinking a little bit about the traces that you leave online. For privacy reasons or for future job prospects, for example. Okay, so that would all be included in what digital skills are. But why are they important? Well, according to Digital Experience Insight Survey, which was conducted in 2019 by JISC, which is a UK-wide higher education body, 70% of students agreed that digital skills were important for their chosen career. Now, I would argue that it should be more than 70%, but only 42% agreed that their course did prepare them for the digital workplace. And only 37% of higher education students agreed that they had regular opportunities to update their digital skills. So, even though the university didn't participate in that survey that year, we know we do face similar issues. We offer loads of resources, training opportunities in digital skills, but we, from talking to students, know that often they're not really that aware of the courses that we do offer. Hence, we're doing these sessions, and please pass on the good news to your friends as well. But there's loads of resources available for you while you're studying at university. And we'll talk about them in more detail in a couple of minutes. But it is important at the moment to take action because a lot of the things that you have access to at the moment while you're at university will cease after graduation. So you can take control of the learning process, use the services, the facilities, in some case software licenses to boost your studying, make yourself more employable while you're at university and you've got access to all of those resources, whether it be webinars that we run, whether it be classroom courses that we run, whether it be online video subscriptions that we've got, training videos. Try and use them while you're here. So to try and help you with that, just to assess what level you maybe are at in the digital skills journey, and it never ends. So I'm a digital skills and training officer, but I know, for example, that I've got, maybe a weakness in things like programming, things like that. So there's always things that you can learn, but you need to have a sort of basic understanding of where your skill sits. So we've put together a package of resources which we call a digital skills framework to help you assess your skills and plan your development. The central parts of that are the digital discovery tool. Now we use JISC, this higher education body created that, and we use that as the basis of our discovery tool in our framework. And it's a self-assessment questionnaire, and it will give you a detailed report about any strengths or areas for your development you might have in your digital skills. And part of our digital skills framework also is the resource finder, where after you've done the discovery tool and maybe it hints at weaknesses you might have, you would go to the resource finder, and for all the different areas, we've mapped them against around 600 courses, our own courses or other courses that are run in the university or online resources, and those map to those capabilities that you'll find once you've done the report. So it's easy for you to go off then, find a resource that will help you upskill in that particular area. Okay, so say it's something like digital creation or programming, you can go off and we'll suggest resources to upskill there. So some of them will be my team's resources, but like I said, some of them might be other parts of the uni, Institute for Academic Development, who've worked for years with postgraduates putting on courses. So you can go off and learn. We run a course, for example, on Python, so that's really popular if you maybe don't have programming skills. It starts at a very basic level. At the moment, everything is online for that course, and you could follow that course from beginning to end. Or something, let's say a bit more basic, if you just need to learn how to reference properly, we would run courses on that as well. So if that's something that once you do the questionnaire, you've maybe got a little bit of a weakness, you can go off and find those resources. But at the beginning, that my team is really quite small. There are only 5 or 6 of us. So we can't possibly teach, even with platforms like Collaborate, where we could get several hundred people. It's difficult to reach the 40,000 students we've got in the university. So we do rely to some extent on, a big part of what we rely on is LinkedIn Learning. Now, some of you may have heard of LinkedIn Learning. It is a world-leading online learning service. There's over 13,000 video courses that you can take, and the university subscribes to it. So it's completely free to you while you're at university, which goes back to me urging you to do this while you're here, and if you can fit in the time to do some of these courses. Because you will lose access to it and you would have to pay for it once you leave university. So to find LinkedIn Learning, that is just on My Ed. You've got a link to LinkedIn Learning in there, and you can get in for free. So really high quality. I'm just noticing there's a couple of maybe questions coming up. I'll try and get to your questions though at the end of the session. Okay. The material on LinkedIn Learning, so like I said, 30,000 video courses, they're taught by industry experts. The video is very high quality, with exercise files often, and closed captions, so subtitles, transcripts, and quizzes to keep you engaged. And it can be anything from programming to presentation skills to Excel or data management skills. It's a really wide-ranging resource, and you can collect certificates once you've done a course to add to your LinkedIn profile. And it's easy to keep track of what learning you have done with LinkedIn Learning because you've got a record there all the time. We'd also recommend our Teresa, I think you may have let me just go and see if you have a particular question, Teresa. I see that your hand's raised. Okay, I'm nearly at the end of the session, the demonstration, Teresa. So I'm just going to lower your hand just now, and we'll try and address your issue after I finish the demo. Okay. Yeah, so I'd also recommend our Developing Your Data Skills course. So maybe you're going to have to deal with data in your own course or your research. Developing Your Data Skill course is done by a member of our team, Tracy, and it's a blended 6-month course for all levels. So from beginners, so if you're completely new to data science, you can start at that level, and you can do things like program in R and Python, even in Excel or in SQL. Okay, and then the last thing on there is 23 things. So that's more to do with managing your digital footprint, understanding social media, understanding how to blog, and also produce video and audio. So there's, as you would guess, there are 23 things that you work through, and you work through them online, and you blog about your. Yeah, I see there's a question there about LinkedIn Learning. I'll share that later. There is, you would blog about your what you find in 23 things. We've also published development journeys. Now, at the moment, we just have a digital development journey for undergraduates, and I realise most of you are postgraduates today. It's not to say, however, that this wouldn't be useful for you. I think it would. So we employed a student intern to work with us, and he looked at what he would have expected from his course, and looking forward as well. So he's still actually a student, and he's put down on this development journey all the resources he thinks that a first year, second year, third year, fourth year student would need to help them with their studies, and then also thinking about employment. So that, although you're postgraduates, it's worth having a look at that as well. And we will at some point also employ someone um, to do a postgraduate one. But on the topic of student interns, we do in our team and across information services employ students in order to give them some experience of working in a university, have something to add to their CVs, as well as give us something of an insight into what approaches students might take in training. So we both gain from that kind of collaboration. We've had students develop the Python programming course that I mentioned, video editing courses, and we also have students as digital champions, and some are interns. And they go off and talk to staff members and students across the university about our services, and also to find out what their needs are. So if you think that working with our team might be something that you'd be interested in, please keep your eyes open for job adverts in the next few weeks, because we will be advertising for people to work with us in the digital skills team. So last couple of slides, the things I would recommend that you go off and do as soon as you have the time is to go to the Digital Skills Framework at digitalskills.ed.ac.uk. Just put Digital Skills Framework into the homepage of the university search. Do the Digital Discovery tool, which will give you this detailed report of where your skill lies in different capability areas. Look at the learner role profile for that one. So that covers what JISC regard as the skill set for a student, whether it's an undergraduate student or a postgraduate student. And then go off and use the resource finder, which is the thing I said that accesses or links to 600 different courses and relates back to the discovery tool. And you can look at where your weaknesses might be and find a relevant resource from the resource finder to help you upskill in that area. We do of course listen to our students. So as I said when we were talking about student employment, we try and always to improve our service, and a good way of doing that is to talk to students in classroom training, for example, and try and understand what their needs are. We always ask for feedback after every course, for example, and that does help us develop our own resources. We also engage on social media, so we've got an Instagram page as well. So you're welcome to post suggestions on there too. All the best for your university career. Thank you very much.